Guys, welcome back to another episode of the Resale Zone, one of my favorite shows here on YouTube, all about reselling stuff on eBay. In today's video, we talk about sourcing and making connections with suppliers to get more inventory. Enjoy today's video.
Hey folks, Jeff here with Resale Heroes, and I'm here with Commonlad.
Hey guys, I'm the Commonlad, and I'm a reseller with my partner Airval, and we sell primarily video games and stuff on eBay.
Yeah, so we basically do the same thing, but we're full-time resellers selling video games, collectibles, and all that good stuff. And today, episode 7 of the eBay Resale Zone, I'll point upwards because of editing. There's going to think.
Yeah, it's going to pop up.
Yeah.
Make a whole thing. I'm loving that.
We're going to talk about getting suppliers. So we're going to kind of do an encore to the sourcing episode that we did at the beginning. So we're going to talk about how to get suppliers, negotiating with suppliers, and we're talking about local suppliers, businesses that would be in your area, and or individuals that are in your area, how to start the conversation, a few catchphrases you could use or a few approaches that you could use, and kind of just everything revolving around that.
I love it. And I think we had a really good conversation about this before, but we were kind of talking about everything in general. I think it's good to focus in on, if you really want to scale and you really are serious about this, what you need to do is make some local connections and find some people who can be reliable sources of inventory going forward. And so I want to sort of start and open up this conversation by saying something that's really important when you're discussing a deal with anybody within the space. This is really valuable stuff. So whenever you're going into a local business, or maybe you're going to a garage sale or a thrift store, you're meeting somebody on Kijiji. And I know I've said this before on the internet. I'm not sure if I said it in the show or not earlier, but the most important thing to say is to tell people what you do. People are always so afraid of oh, what are they going to think at this garage sale if I tell them that I'm reselling their stuff or whatever, and they freak out. And yes, occasionally you'll get that person that's just going to be totally pissed off or whatever, and it is what it is. But most of the time people are going to be super interested, especially when you kind of play that small business aspect and you're out hustling or whatever. I think a lot of people appreciate it, especially nowadays. But that leads to so much more. So instead of you just walking into a garage sale, picking up one item and leaving, you walk in there, you pick up an item, you have a conversation with the person hosting, and all of a sudden they go, oh, you sell video games? I got 3 boxes in the basement, and bam, you've just made a connection. Or maybe you're at a store and you're willing to bring that up with the person and you're able to get a connection that way. So I think that's sort of, we can build this entire conversation off of, but I want to mention that because I think that's a really important thing when going in and kind of making these connections.
It's a good point. And, I think we all have a little bit of hesitancy sometimes talking about that, branding yourself. And I mean, it's not like I go around the grocery store, tell everybody, hey, Jeff from Resale Heroes, but you need to pick your moments, right? So I don't tell everyone that we do that, but I tell a lot of people. Sometimes you can tell that it would be valuable to do that.
Yeah, you kind of have to read the room.
Yeah, you got to read the room, right? So some people, to set expectations, some people will be weird about it. Some people will not like the fact that you're buying cheap from them and you're going to try and resell it to make money. Not that they could make more money just selling it locally, but it is what it is. Some people just have that mentality. But like you say, most people won't. And I mean, I'm not saying 10 years ago, but I mean, in this day and age, people get it. People just find that stuff interesting. People love watching stuff like Storage Wars and those kinds of things. And they're just fascinated with that kind of thing, that anyone could do what we do if they just apply themselves to it.
And if you work them through it too, they can understand the work that goes into it additionally on top of what you say, we're going to refurbish all these games and test them and then spend the time to list them, take photos of them, put them on eBay. And I think people can appreciate that.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times, actually, kind of skipping ahead a little bit here, talking about negotiation. But so sometimes we're going to make offers on big bundles. And I say sometimes, I mean, all the time we make offers on big bundles of games. And people will sometimes say, that's a little low for me. I kind of want this. And I just threw my pen because I'm so excited. So what I tell them is, the only way to get that price that you're expecting is to sell all of them individually, which is what I'm going to do if you sell them to me. But it's going to take me time and effort and money and resources to do that. If you want to deal with 100 people and sell it all individually, knock yourself out. I'm going to move on and go somewhere else. But if you're, I mean, don't say it like that, but that's kind of the idea. there's no point buying something if you can't make money off of it. So I'm just straight up with them. If you want to get rid of them all right here, right now, you need to make me a good deal on it. But so here's an interesting question. As you were talking about what we just talked about with kind of branding yourself, I had an interesting one word question that popped into my head, and it's why? Why would you want suppliers, right? So what's the point of suppliers? What is the, like, what's the benefit of having a supplier? What's the benefit to the supplier? What's the benefit to you? I can talk about it, but I thought I'd throw you.
I'll say something here, which is something
Yeah.
that we just talked about right before we got onto this.
Hmm.
And we can break down sort of, yes, there, you can't necessarily source all the inventory yourself, or you don't want to spend all this time sourcing inventory. And if you can get these sort of connections, you can have boatloads of stuff coming in with very minimal work. This is sort of the quickest, most streamlined way to get inventory. But an interesting thing that I think we talked about, which I thought was super neat, there's a value village near my place that we like to go to. And oftentimes it's a little empty. And so we were on a trip. I was there with Araval last night, and we went to the value village. It was dead empty. Like, there was not a thing in that place. And we decided there's a swap shop, like the plaza next to it. So, okay, well, why don't we go in there and kind of have a discussion with them and see if we can work something out? And sure enough, we actually did. I'm not sure if we'll get into that here today, but in talking to them, one of the things that we discovered was that they pop into the value village like 8-10 times a day. They're always just over there looking to pick out inventory and things. But my point in this story is that they're doing that work for us, even if we have to pay them a little more or whatever it might be, because we're not going to get the same prices as they're going to get at value village. But we're not having to pop into value village 10 times a day. We can show up once a week there and pick up a whole bunch of stuff from them at a slightly higher price, but with way less work. In this business, time is money. And one of the number one ways that you can save time is to reduce the time that you spend sourcing, because that's such a major kind of factor in the business.
Well, so you make it, this prompts me to say something else, which is, saying it differently, you're basically telling me that they built a long-lasting relationship with their Goodwill, where they can go in every day and basically pick up what they want and get a good price for it, and then resell it for money. And now we're doing the same. Well, you're doing the same thing with them. And so the whole idea is, so why a supplier? What's the benefit of the supplier? Like you said, it can save you time because they're doing the sourcing, and then you go to their store and handpick the things that you want. And the thing is, at first, I mean, you can't make ridiculous demands of a shop owner when you've never met him or her. So, but once you have a relationship built with them, so when you have your first visit, that's kind of the first impression. Like in a relationship, you've got your first impression, you want to make a good impression, you want to get a good deal, but at the same time, you have to foster that relationship. So then, if you go once a month to this shop, they're going to get to know you. They're going to recognize you. They might even start putting games aside for you, all the better ones and all that kind of good stuff. And maybe you'll have a dialogue going on where they're going to contact you first when they get the good stuff in. And who knows, maybe someday they're going to have a really expensive item that they don't really know what to do with, and you're going to spot it, and then you're going to start buying other stuff and then other stuff. And part of this is supporting your local business. And I was telling Commonlad about this before we started, that Resale Heroes, so we've had, so eBay has a new feature now that it shows you how many transactions you've had. So I guess we've had 13,000 transactions. But we have probably injected over $100,000 in the community where we're at. And I mean, we're talking about a small community. So that's helping businesses stay in business. It's helping people pay their rent. And, like
it's keeping,
it's not like we're a nonprofit organization, but like we're helping people out. And every time we go to the businesses we go to, we're like, oh, hey, how's business? How was the past month since we've been here? It's been slow, not many sales. I'm disappointed even in the lead up to Christmas. Like we don't like it. It's hard for brick and mortar businesses nowadays. And so they need us to help them out. And they don't have the know-how. Most of them don't have the know-how or the manpower or the willingness to take the time to list everything on eBay. So we do it like we make them money by buying their stuff. And something else is that a lot of these places, such as, I mean, Goodwill's an example, but like these swap shops that you mentioned, like pawn shops or like trade stores or whatever, they'll have an entire back room full of stuff that no one will ever see until the stuff in the store sells. And Goodwill has a warehouse full of stuff. They're never going to run out of stuff. So you're really helping them out by like, if you could clean out a whole shelf, they can bring out other stuff that they have to get for sale, or they can buy from other people. Like it's like paying it forward in a different way.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting. And again, as you start to build those relationships more, as you say, you'll gain more access to that sort of back room, if you will, and you can start to literally have a pile put aside for you. Like in the one example that we went to the other day, they were putting business cards away for every single one of the people that they can call for different things. Okay, you know, here's our pro audio guy, here's our whatever. And when they get abundance of it, or they just can't sell it, or whatever it might be, they have somebody to reach out to and sell it to. And that's going to, again, to your point, you know, help them make, you know, month's end. But additionally, you know, you're supporting the business and you're getting something beneficial out of it. And I think with that, maybe we could break more down into like, how do you get these deals going? So what's the way to talk to them? How do you frame the conversation? What are the prices that you negotiate for? How do you sort of scale this and build this sort of relationship? Because it's really important. I want to hear, I know you've done it way more than I have, so I really want to hear from you, because you're good. You're a sales guy, as I know. So you got to tell us about it. Tell us the secrets.
Sales guy. So to put things in perspective, at this point in our series, we're assuming that you've got a small store going. You already have your basics set. You've got, you know, 100 or a couple hundred listings. You've got some sales under your belt. So you've got a little bit of cash flow going. So of course, mileage will vary depending on how much money you have on hand. So, I mean, you have to make an offer on what you're able to afford. But I mean, it's better to be able to buy $10 every month or every couple weeks. 10 items every couple weeks from someone than never buy anything at all. And the more your store grows, you'll be able to buy more. But so with that in mind, keeping in mind that we are a full-time store, we've got one of the biggest stores in Canada. So we make offers on really big stuff. But I mean, you could get the same deal on a smaller scale. But essentially, the best way is to just start a conversation. And I have started my conversations like this many times. Hey, my name is JF. I run an eBay store. We source our stuff locally to support local businesses like yours. We have other, I don't name them, but I say we've got, you know, relationships with these other like local businesses. And I was just wondering if I bought, so I usually say 100 games or 200 games or whatever, but you could say, if I bought 10 games, would you make me a good deal? If I bought 20 games, would you make me a good deal? Or if I bought these 5 action figures, would you make me a good deal? Like, you can go to comic book stores, you can go to pawn shops, you can go to like, because I think comic book stores would have, generally speaking, or like a hobby store, generally speaking, they would probably pay more to people for than a pawn shop. So if you go to a pawn shop, I think they'd be more likely to negotiate. But anyway, so starting the conversation like that, it's straight up like, look, I can give you money right now, but I need a good deal because I'm another business and we can help each other out. So that's a soft way to start the conversation. But you need to be like, you need to be comfortable just saying hi to a human, you know, like ask for the manager and talk to the manager or the owner, like the person that calls the shots that's actually able to give you the discounts. Another way is I've gone to a one-man shop and I looked around and I identified who was the boss and I said, hey, if I bought everything on this shelf, which would have been like 200 movies or whatever, would you make us a good deal? And he's like, yes. And now that's one of our favorite places to go. And I couldn't believe that those words came out of my mouth. Like, it was the most ridiculous thing. Like, it just sounds so cheesy. Like, if I buy half your store, you're gonna make me a deal, you know? But now we go there every month. We have a great relationship and a great understanding with this shop. And now we're at a point where, I mean, we've bought thousands of dollars of stuff from him, and like, he's happy when we walk in because he knows he's making money today. And so, but now we handpick what we buy from him, and we've kind of been buying just the good stuff. And I just tell him straight up, here's another sentence that you could say, like, once you have an understanding with them, you can say something like, look, I want to buy these 20 games or these 50 games or these however many, but the prices that you have on them is the price that I can get for them when I sell them. So the only way that I can buy them is if you make me a really good deal. And usually I'll make an offer that's around 40% of the full value.
Yep.
Because they probably paid 25% or 30% or whatever. But we usually settle on about 50%. And so the thing is, if you're hand picking stuff that's worth $30, $40, $50, it flips a lot faster because it's higher quality stuff. So it's not like selling a $5 CD or a $10 movie or whatever. Like, you're making $20, $30, $40 a pop. So it's more worth it. And at the same time, most people walking into a pawn shop walk in with $5 or $10 or $20. They're not usually there to buy expensive Pokemon games or like that rare Super Nintendo game or like that super rare PlayStation 2 RPG. Like, so that could sit on that guy's shelf for forever. And every time I ask him how his business, you know, they say it's slow. So they're really happy to see us come in. So, I mean, that's kind of two approaches. And really, you gotta find, like, we have a way with people. Like, I've developed confidence, and like, I'm not arrogant, but I've developed confidence where, like, I know that I can help these guys out. And like, I also know that our store sells more than his entire store combined, but that we can help him out. We can help each other out, because there's going to people that are going to go to him or to these other shops that will never come to us because they don't know we exist. So that's part of the whole networking and relationship thing. And there's another time where by having that relationship, if he gets offered something that he can't buy, but he knows that we would, he can refer us. And actually, there was another shop basically that they sold us 3,000 CDs, and it was something like that. And I mean, it's not like it was an exciting buy, but it was a great value buy. We had bought 3,000 music CDs for $400. It's like 16 cents a CD. It's basically free. Crazy. Like, it's just, yeah. And they were just getting rid of stuff. So, and now that other place is also one of our favorite places to go. So we go to these places once a month. We handpick what we want. As soon as we walk in, it's like they roll out the red carpet. It's like,
you get the full treatment.
Yeah. Everybody out of the way. These guys are paying customers. They're not here just to have a coffee and just to talk. And like, we're helping them and they're helping us. And we have that mutual understanding. Will everyone want to build that relationship with you? No, but you don't want to deal with those people anyway. You want to find those people. In sales, they say you got to go for the no. And in other words, it kind of means it's a numbers game in the sense that to get to a yes, you have to go through the no's.
Absolutely.
No 3-4 times before you get a yes. But those people that will say yes, if you continue to take care of that relationship and to keep giving them business, I mean, it just keeps on giving. And you really never know what kind of surprise they're going to have for you. And now they kind of throw stuff in for free that clutters up their space, but we can sell it for $30 or $40 or $20 or whatever. So.
And so I think that approach is great. And I think that's the kind of approach that you should probably be taking when you're starting out. So there's a couple sort of expectations I think that we should lay out as well with regards to when you're actually purchasing stuff. Sure. The first major one is, especially if you've been purchasing from thrift stores when you're starting out here, because we're going to, again, assume that you're just, at a small store stage with a couple hundred listings. The number one thing is to not expect that you're going to go in there and pay garage sale or thrift store prices.
Right.
It's just how it is. And I don't want anybody to go in there. You know, you don't want to insult the store owner, and you also don't want to be offended when you hear the price that they're going to give you. You have to realize, just like JF said, that you're going to be paying 50%. The benefit of that is, like we discussed, you're saving time. Additionally, you can potentially be a little handpicky, especially if you're paying the 50% margin. Now you're picking things that have a high sell-through rate and that are going to be worth the money. And if you're doing just bulk of everything, like you say, you're buying a shelf, I suppose, you know, you can get a better deal or whatever. But for the most part, you're paying the higher margins to get stuff that you know will sell, that you're going to get a high value for. So that's really important to know. You know, just so nobody goes in there thinking that they're going to go and buy a bunch of games for $1 a piece. You're not. Additionally, on top of that, when it comes to the negotiation, and this is sort of something that we've talked about as well, there's a couple different approaches that you can use. So once you've walked in and developed that relationship, and you say, okay, yeah, we want to buy $200 or 200 games or whatever. And there's a couple tricks I like to use when I'm trying to lay this out. And volume will be your friend, as always. So if you're just buying 10 items, you know, you're not going to get as good of a deal as if you walk in and you say, I'll take the whole shelf for 200 or whatever it might be. But the couple things I like to say is, once I've identified what I do, and you know, we're resellers or whatever, we're gonna try to sell this stuff on eBay for you, or essentially for you, because you're not gonna do it. So what I like to lead with is I like to ask them for the price. So I always leave that to them. I say, well, what do you think is going to be a fair price for this? And then I also lead with what we normally pay for these items is around $2 to $3, or, you know, $3 or whatever it is that we would normally pay for those kind of items. So it's a very simple talk. It's kind of like, you know, well, what would you price them out for us if we buy 200? We normally pay this. What could you do for us? And it's a very simple thing like that. And I always leave it up to them, because I don't want to walk in and say 3 when they were going to do it for 2.
Yeah.
So I'm always afraid to give the first number. It depends, maybe if it's specific stuff or whatever. Sometimes you can get a deal directly off of their listed retail price. So you can just say 40% or whatever, 50% off. But most of the time, I think that's the approach that's going to work the best. And then you can kind of work from there and negotiate a little more if needed. But that's sort of the approach that we've used the few times that we've done it, and it seemed to have worked well. Again, I'm curious to hear what your approach is and how you kind of approach the negotiation side of things.
Yeah. So a big part of that depends on where your relationship's at with these guys. So that owner that I talked to you about that we go the most often to, he's relatively well organized, and he knows that if he has it priced at a certain amount, it's because he paid a certain amount. So he can't go below a certain amount. So the way that we do it with him, he tallies up his listed price, and then we do a percentage off of that. And I try and get 50 to 60% off of that. So I'll usually lead with 60% off, and we'll settle at 50% off. And like at the same time, I don't, how could I say this? I try not to be too intense about the negotiation, because I mean, the guy, I don't want to say he's desperate for money. He's not desperate for money, but at the same time, I don't want to squeeze him dry.
No, you're not looking to rip the people off, right?
No,
you're not looking to walk out of there and leave them empty.
But so he'll be honest, and he'll be like, you know, 60 is a little low. Could we do 50? I'll be like, fine. But if I would be like, no, I want 60, he'd do it, but he would remember. He'd remember that, you know? Yeah. So you kind of have to gauge where you're at. But another thing that you could say, here's one of my funny sentences that I say sometimes when I don't really know where to start with a negotiation, like, again, because you don't want to insult them, but you also don't want to shoot yourself in the foot. So there's sometimes that, you know, something is worth 300, but they only want $100 for it. But you may offer them 150 if you don't know any better. So something that I'll say sometimes, it is totally funny, but something that I'll say sometime, and it totally messes with people's minds. I'll say this. All right, I'm interested. I'm not really sure where to start. So why don't we pretend that you and I have been negotiating for the past 30 minutes and we come up with a number that we think is fair for the both of us. What does that number look like to you? And then they're like, because if then they go through their minds kind of like, okay, he would have said this, then I would have said that. And then they kind of get to their number. And usually the number they come up with is good. And But there's also a little bit of wiggle room. Like if you say, all right, well, that's a little high for me. Could you do $20 less, or could you do? And they'll be like, okay, fine. But it also takes the tension out, and it just makes them think, right? And
you have to make it fun. Like you're building a connection, right? It's a relationship, and
exactly.
That's super interesting.
But so with our other supplier, another one of our suppliers, so they have different shells. So like pawn shops, they'll have shells that $3 for $10 for three games, and then they'll have like the better games in the cases and or the display cases or whatever. So we kind of make a mix of all that, and we just kind of say like, would you take this much for it? We sometimes, or they'll say, okay, could you do 1,200? And I'm like, oof, that's more than what, could you do 8 or 9 or whatever, right? So I think if you're not sure where to start, let them start, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Like we make mistakes all the time, but overall you learn from it. But so also don't let yourself be intimidated by the price that they throw at you, because they're store owners. They're also looking to make profit. So even though they say they'd sell it to you for 500, it doesn't mean they wouldn't sell it to you for 300. It's just they like to sell it for 5, but maybe they can afford 3, right? So, and it also helps to know like which part of town they're in. And I don't like to say it that way, but if they're from kind of a sketchy part of town, likely they don't pay that much for their stuff, so they are more willing to negotiate. Whereas if you're kind of in a nicer neighborhood, probably they have more upstanding citizens bringing them their stuff, and maybe they do pay more for their stuff. So it's just something to keep in mind, like the cleanliness of the store. I mean, if the store's dirty and all that kind of stuff, just little things
little things that you can use to your advantage. That's really interesting. A couple of things that I wanted to bring up on part of that, and what you just said, which is all really great. The one thing that's interesting is that some of these store owners will actually price their merchandise based on what they pay, not based on what the value is. Yes. And that could be, 40% up from whatever they paid or whatever it is. And that's when you run into those situations where you have $100 game that's actually worth 300 because they're pricing based on a margin that they want to hit, not based on what the actual item's worth, because maybe they don't have time to research everything or whatever it might be. So that's a really valuable thing to note, and something that you can use to your advantage, especially when negotiating on a margin front, is what's the sort of lowest margin that you'll take on all this stuff, and you can actually end up getting a really good deal in that sense. Another thing to know is that a lot of these store owners are knowledgeable in their fields. So if they're buying comic books, they know about comic books, and they're going to know what the inherent value is. They're going to know what they're going for on eBay individually. They're going to know what they're going for on eBay in bulk. And that can work in your favor, or it can work against you sometimes. But I think for the most part, as long as you guys are on the same page and you can say, okay, well, auctions are telling us this, they're $250 a piece. And that you can use that to sort of come up with an idea, because for the most part, if they have 200 games and they can get $250 for them on an eBay auction right now, they're not going to sell them to you for 2, because that's almost no work, right? And they can do that. So a couple interesting things there for sure. But I mean, on the negotiation front, it's very much like you said, keep it fun. And again, you're building a connection, a relationship that ideally can last and get you buying more stuff. And again, with the negotiation thing, one of the other things to note is that when you're starting out, you have to be willing to either pay a little bit more money or buy stuff that's not necessarily going to be worth it at first, because that's all part of developing the relationship. Don't expect that you're going to go in there and get the same price that you're going to get because you've been going there for 10 months versus me who just walked in there and I think I can get the same rate. So it's going to be a matter of maybe picking a few things that are maybe not as valuable, that you're just simply taking off their hands, and you might break even on them or only make a little bit of profit, as well as potentially paying a little more until you can do that repeatedly every time and they start to know you, and then you can start to kind of negotiate more and get a better deal the more stuff you buy.
Yeah. And in our experience, the pricing can be pretty wild sometimes. Like, so again, I keep comparing 2 particular shops that we go to, and one's pretty reasonable. Like it makes sense, the prices that he puts on them for the most part, but you have to not be afraid to say, look, I would like this item, but you have it priced at higher than what I can get for it. So like, I'm sure you didn't pay that much for it. You probably just thought it was worth that much, but it isn't. So I'd like it. but only if you're able to like make me a really good deal on it. So this particular item was a, I think it was called Resistance. It was a PS Vita game. It was worth like 35 or 40 bucks, and he had it listed for 50. But we grab anything that's PS Vita, PlayStation Vita, because it sells really well.
Mhm.
But I said, like, I can't buy it even at 50% off. It wouldn't be low enough because you're already priced above market. So I said, like, if you can do 15 on it, I think I said 10. I played a little
Really
bit on that one.
lowballed, yeah.
I'm like, if you can do 10 on this one, I'll take it. He was like, ooh, you know those sounds when you know it's like,
Yeah.
ooh, that hurts. Then he took out his calculator. I was like, okay, if you can do 15, I'll take it. 15 is really the number that I wanted. But so I said, so we took that, and like there was another game he had priced at 20 because it was really rare, but it was only worth like 12. And I was like, look, if you can do like 3, we'll take it. And like, you have to not be afraid to, I mean, don't insult them, but just say like, this is priced pretty high. And there's another store where the pricing is just all over the place. I have no idea where they're getting their prices at. They'll have like 5 PlayStation 1s, one's priced at 60, one's priced at 40, one's priced at 20, one's like, it's just,
Yeah. And that might be the margin thing, right? Where they're building on what they paid versus
it could also be they were just throwing, they're
totally
just
random
spitballing prices, and just seeing what sells. But so I've told them, like, do you have wiggle room on this? Because that's pretty high. I'm kind of interested, but definitely not for this price. And if they say no, I mean, you just move on. But you want to deal with them on the stuff they want to get rid of, basically, because when they want to get rid of something, that's where they will deal with you the most, where they're the most willing to negotiate with you.
Yeah, the stuff that's been sitting, right?
Yeah.
That's a really interesting point. Trying to think about what else we can say on this topic.
We said we'd talk about the fear of rejection.
Oh, I like this.
Fear of rejection. Fear. Man. So rejection is not fun.
It's going to be the reason. It's going to be the reason why most of you don't do this.
Yeah. So most people don't. I mean, and I'm actually I've been a shy person my whole life. You know, I've been through a lot in my life and different things. And different people from different walks of life deal with rejection differently. But for the most part, it makes people not want to interact with others for fear of being rejected. And it might sound silly, but people hate being told no, or they think they're going to get judged by someone. But I mean, who cares what the guy at the like, you shouldn't care. But people sometimes psychologically care about what everyone thinks of them. And that's actually pretty unhealthy. But it really doesn't matter what the guy at Value Village thinks of you. But if you never ask, you're never going to get that super deal, right?
You never know.
But if you ask, okay, there's people here and there that are going to say no, but there's people here and there that are going to say yes. And so you have to make peace. You got to make peace with rejection. I mean, but I mean, you can put more feathers in your hat or put more odds in your favor by kind of approaching it in the way we're approaching it and hand choosing. I mean, don't go to Walmart and try and negotiate with people because they can't, as far as I know, they can't negotiate with you. But if you go to local shops, they have some measure of margin that they can play with.
Yeah, it's really interesting. That's something, again, that you'll familiarize yourself with the longer that you build the relationship, and you'll sort of understand what they like to take for things and how much they pay for things, and you can use that as wiggle room. But when it comes to the fear of rejection, you just had to go for it. I mean, there's no other way to say. I mean, you're gonna get no's. Like half the people you talk to are gonna say no or whatever, and it's just part of the game. But if you don't do that, then you're not going to be able to build these kind of connections, and you're not going to speed up your inventory sourcing process, and you'll be at Value Village every day or whatever, spending all your time there and not making as much as the people that had the courage to go out and ask for the deal. So you just have to do it.
If you don't do it, you're leaving money on the table, basically.
Yep, absolutely.
You're getting the low-hanging fruit that no one can see, but there's a bunch of there's some quality ripe fruit in the display cases that people don't ask about, right? So it's you just gotta try it.
Yeah.
You know? And if you get, like, regardless of if you get a no or a yes, the next time you can do better. and just think about, okay, that went that way. I was kind of nervous. I said this instead of that. And just give it some thought, right? Don't beat yourself up, but give it some thought and be like, okay, what's one thing that I could improve for next time? Then go to the next place and the next place and the next place. And I mean, we probably have 4 or 5 suppliers that supply us regularly with stuff, relatively regularly. And like 2 places, maybe 3 places that we go every month. And we're developing more. But so you don't need to have 100. You don't need to have 100 of these. Like even and like we're a full-time store, so we're building income for more than one person. So, but if you're just trying to build a small store to sustain yourself, I mean, maybe only 1 relationship would be good, or maybe 2 would be plenty, right? And so, and again, we're talking about which places are best for like video games, but the same places would be good for almost anything except clothing. But so Value Village would be good for clothing, and sometimes they have some open to negotiation. But you'd really have to have a really good
you had to have a volume and a good connection there. Yeah,
exactly. And I just want to throw something else out there. I know we're talking about suppliers, but when you're dealing with just individuals, there are other people that are resellers. And a lot of resellers get stuff for cheap and try and sell it more expensive. But when you see someone who has hundreds of listings, you can say, hey, would you make me a deal if I bought this and that and that? And then could you do this price? And then we've dealt with local resellers on multiple occasions, whether they thought something was only worth so much, but it was worth more, or, but now we know each other. So we're like, oh, that's the guy that comes at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
and whatever, right? But so something else I want to say is that when you're just dealing with people that are not resellers, I almost always, when I remember to, I often ask, do you have anything else for sale? When I'm there and I've got extra money, I'll say, do you have any other games for sale? And probably 1 out of 3 times or 1 out of 2 times, they'll say, actually, yeah, I have another bag of games that I haven't had the time because I've been busy with work and whatever. Would you make me a price on this? Then I'll make them a price with whatever I have left in my wallet. It's like $40 or $30, and it might be worth 150 or 200 or whatever. And sometimes they'll take it, And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a full extra bundle for so cheap, just because it's so easy for them. You're already there. You got money in your hand, and like, you want it out the door, give it to me. And but that's also a good way to develop contacts, because you can tell them, if you have stuff to sell in the future, here's my Instagram, here's my Facebook, here's this, here's that, here's my email, whatever. You can give them a business card if you have one. And like, it's all about networking, but softly, right? Like just building, hand choosing a few relationships, and they will pay off time and time and time again, and often in ways that you wouldn't have imagined. People will get their hands on the randomest stuff, and you don't know how they got it, but they're looking at times where you're sleeping, or whatever. When you're listing, they're looking at things. So I mean, one person cannot buy everything. So if you have different people out there kind of helping you out, it helps you get access to other stuff.
Absolutely. I want to lead off with one final really important point for anybody that's still kind of concerned about the negotiation side, making the connections and everything. I think the most important thing here is that honesty will play the best in your favor. Being open about the price that you're going to sell something for, open about from their point of view what they paid for it, and just being open about what you're willing to pay for it to make this kind of money, and the work that needs to go into it to make that kind of money. And it's a very easy way to justify the price that you're demanding. And I think as long as you can remain honest through the entire conversation, give everybody a fair price, you'll be able to develop a really strong connection through this method.
Yeah. And that reminds me of something. So people will people who sell collections every now and then will have looked up what things are worth, and they will have looked at what sells on eBay. They'll have looked at price charting, but they price it at what it's worth, which it's not worth your time to buy at retail price. So you have to know what's worth buying and what's not. And back to your point, you need to be comfortable saying, hey, I I like what you're selling. Is just I can't do that price because if I sell the only, again, it comes back to the only way to get that full price is to sell them individually, which is what I'm going to do. But when you factor in shipping cost and the fees and all that stuff, I mean, you need to give me a break here if you actually want me to buy them. And sometimes they'll say no, and that's fine. If they want to deal with selling them all individually, don't waste your time negotiating. Like, you know,
and you can say no. Like, there's also the ability to walk.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like one of the most powerful negotiating tools is to actually just say no and walk away, right? And it's, you know, if it's a connection, whatever you're buying, like we talked about, you can buy stuff for the sake of buying it and to build a connection, whatever. But there are also times when you will probably want to say no.
Yeah, there's one example that comes to mind. So Jeremy, my business partner, had negotiated with a guy who was selling. It was something like 34 Nintendo 64 games with custom cases. So they were not original cases. It was not original art. So basically, he was selling 34 carts. Yeah. And Jeremy had priced them out at about 1,500, and the guy was asking like 1,500, but he negotiated them down to like 1,200. But 12 or 11, it might have been 1,100. But the guy said most of them have their manuals. So some of these games, just the manual was worth $50 or $20 or $30. So, I mean, we had factored in another like $500 or $600 worth of manuals.
Right.
Right. So Jeremy and I live in different cities. So he sent me to go meet the guy. So we meet at U-Haul at a storage locker, and he brings all the stuff out. And like, I'm looking at the stuff, and I saw one manual. I'm like, where are the manuals? He's like, oh, whatever's there is what's there. So there was just one manual, and it was like one of the basically worthless ones. And I was like, ooh, we were counting on it. Yeah. We could still have bought it and still made a little bit of money, but it would have been a lot of work for nothing. So like, I'm sitting there and I'm staring at it, and I'm like, okay, how do I handle this without insulting this guy? Like, basically the negotiation happened between Jeremy and him. And I'm like, all right, listen, I can't pay that much for this. Like, you in your ad, it says most of them have manuals. And then he's like, yeah, but on price charting and eBay, it says 1,500. And I'm like, that's fine. But again, with the fees and the shipping and all that, like we're looking at $300 or $400 that we're losing there. So, you know, we went through that whole conversation, and I called Jeremy and I'm like, what do you want to do? And Jeremy's like, you decide, I guess you're there. And I just looked at the guy and I was like, listen, if the manuals are not there, we are missing out on $400 or $500 of value. We cannot pay this price. So I need you to go down on the price. And he's like, I can't go any lower. And I was like, okay, thank you for your time. We're going to pass. He was upset. He was mad. I was like, well, I can't buy this just to please you. You know, like, you have to factor in all the time it was going to take, because the custom cases and the custom art, we couldn't sell them because they're basically counterfeit. So we'd have to sell just the cards and whatever. It would have been a lot of work for not much money. So we did want to deal with him though, because he had like a lot of rare stuff that he was selling, but it's just, he was asking for full price on everything.
Couldn't come down a lot.
Like, he wouldn't come down. Like, he was selling graded Pokemon cards. He was selling, like, it was pretty exciting, but he wouldn't, like, he was just, he didn't want to negotiate. So don't waste your energy and time. Do your due diligence, know what you can afford. And if they can't meet you there or close to there, just move on. You know, like,
you don't have to buy everything.
No, you really shouldn't. Like, sometimes you need to move on and say no. And again, just a random other thing. When we were at the last time we went to our supplier, there was a game that we really wanted. So we opened it, and it was so scratched. I was just like, nope. I just put it.
Yeah, back. Exactly.
I was like, I don't think this is fixable. I just gave it to him. So usually he checks them, but I guess he missed that one, and it just put it in another pile. But
and that's one of the mottos too that I like to follow is that there's a lot of easier ways to lose money. So there's no sense in putting all this work into this, you know, just because you're at negotiation, you can get it for this price involved, but after fees and all that stuff, you end up losing money on it. Well, I could have just sat at home that whole time and not done anything, and I would have saved money, right? Like you can't buy everything, and you don't want to, I don't think.
Well, no, because if you buy 100 games, you have to factor in
The time,
100 envelopes,
everything.
the fees on all those games. So, I mean, you got to factor in all those costs. So you need to get familiar with all those things over time. And then you get to know what you can really afford. And you want to develop those relationships with the people who get it. Like the two guys that we deal with, they get it.
They get it.
When I say I can't go higher than this, they know that they get it. Like they're not going to push. And if they say no, they say no. They don't usually say no, but you need to. It's give and take, right? So sometimes I'll pay a little extra to help them out, and sometimes we're going to get that really expensive game for a really good price. But if you go time and time again, it all evens out. So you have to look at this again like a relationship that you're building. And there are, again, coming back to my first question, I guess, why the suppliers, because we're kind of wrapping up here, why the suppliers are important is that they may have a store and they're going to get supplies or merchandise that you wouldn't have had access to because people go to their store physically and you don't have, well, chances are you don't have a physical store. So it gives you access to other stuff. They did all the work. You just walk in and negotiate a little bit and you walk out. You didn't have to deal with the clients. You didn't have to do all that stuff. And so you have to look at it like an important relationship that supplements your business, and it just saves you so much time. You will get to a point in your business where your most valuable resource will be your time. You will be willing to pay a little bit more for shipping supplies, for whatever, like for merchandise, for this, for that, for equipment, to save on time because you're only going to have a certain amount of hours to work with. So we're okay paying a little extra so that we can save a half hour. We're okay paying a little extra so we can save an hour here and there. And but those are all things that as your business grows, you have to grow with it. And that's one thing that we had learned, that the way that we were doing things at first doesn't work anymore. When you're selling 100 items or 200 items a week, you need to be more efficient and all that stuff. But anyway, so I think unless there's anything else that you wanted to say, I think that covers it. Awesome. Well, guys, we're going to wrap up for today. That was exciting, man. That was
fun. I enjoyed that episode.
Yeah, that was good. And so yeah, make sure you like and subscribe. Drop us your comments in the comments. Let us know your questions. What are you wondering about? What did you find interesting? What's an interesting item that you bought or something that you're considering, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll get back to you in the future. And make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys.
Resale Zone.
Oh, yeah.